You know, one thing I've noticed in today's gaming landscape is pretty apparent. You can really tell how great a game is or how great a game truly will be by how long people talk about it after its initial release. Games like Chrono Trigger is a great example. Deus Ex, the original one, is also a good example too. And it turns out that for some reason, the past couple of days, the entire internet has been abuzz about one game that came out 24 years ago. And that game is Morrowind. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm in my 40s, almost mid 40s right now. Yeah, don't let the grays fool you. They're coming in pretty hard and fast. But the thing is, I grew up with Morrowind. It was my first Elder Scrolls game, actually. And it teleported me to a world, to a place that I really didn't think would ever exist. Everything from the music, the characters, the enemies, the armor, the skills, everything about it just screamed to me something that you don't even get today right now. And that's care, compassion, and actual atmosphere. And trust me, if you haven't played Morrowind, I really suggest that you do so, especially if Oblivion or Skyrim were some of your first RPGs in the Elder Scrolls series. It's gotten so bad for me that I basically regularly play Morrowind on my Steam Deck with OpenMW on Linux. It's been the one game that I come back to over and over again, aside from the other two I talked about before. Look, I know you're reinstalling Chrono Trigger and Deus Ex right now because I mentioned it, but really, hear me out. Hold on a second. Trust me. But see, Morrowind is back in the news not because of what you might actually think. It's back in the news because Bethesda developers are in fact talking about it. We've heard rumors about a Fallout 3 and a Fallout New Vegas remaster. And personally, I liked Fallout 3 quite a bit, but I really liked Fallout 1 a hell of a lot more. And I honestly prefer that sort of like top-down isometric kind of gameplay. I guess that pretty much breeds into my entire fascination with Diablo and Path of Exile as well. But the thing is, it wasn't the fact that Bethesda developers were talking about Morrowind, it was the fact of how they were talking about Morrowind, and it really put into concern what's happening in the gaming industry right now, and why we get so many games that feel empty, lacking soul, substance, and don't provide anything proper for gamers to actually sink their teeth into and really enjoy. And it kind of sheds some light as to why every game right now feels pretty boring. IGN posted a tweet saying this, quote, "Go back and play Morrowind and tell me that's the game you want to play again," said Bruce Nesmith, who worked for Bethesda for over 17 years, adding that playing The Elder Scrolls 3 would not stand the test of time. Right off the bat, I'm incredibly confused by this statement. If you go on YouTube right now and you just type "played Morrowind for the first time," you'll see a breadth and depth of videos that say, "Holy this game is actually amazing," and they'll be well over an hour long, and they'll go into great detail. They'll start off saying, yeah, at the beginning I kind of didn't like it, but the more I played, the more I was gradually hooked and I couldn't stop playing. And that's what happens to basically everybody who plays Morrowind. It's really kind of odd to hear something like that being said, especially with the current state of the Elder Scrolls, where it's just a consistent re-release of Skyrim over and over again. And Skyrim is good, I guess, if you really want to have that kind of experience. I consider Skyrim to be the kind of game you play when you're bundled up in a bunch of blankets in the very cold of winter, and you've had a couple of gummies, and you're just trying to sit back, relax, and kind of unwind. A very passive gaming experience more than anything. More akin to just exploring locations, seeing what's there, and moving on to the next one. Nothing truly role-playing about it. And yeah, that could be great for some people, but it doesn't fit what I'm really looking for. And I feel like what's happening right now is a lot of game developers are looking to try and satiate the more casual audience rather than going after the true niche that put that studio on the map where they were, that made those deep mechanic style games. But I think what's even worse is what Bruce Nesmith says in the interview, with the article from IGN saying this: a former veteran Bethesda developer has cast doubt on the possibility of Morrowind remaster in the same vein as the recently released Oblivion remaster, saying going back to play The Elder Scrolls 3 now, over 20 years after it came out, would make fans cringe. Why? In an interview with Pressbox PR, Bruce Nesmith, who left Bethesda in 2021, midway through the development of Starfield, having worked at the company for over 17 years, highlighted a number of reasons why Morrowind probably won't be the top of Todd Howard's remaster list. saying, quote, "The problem with doing Morrowind is that I bet they don't have the original code," Nesmith said. "The game is so old, I don't know if the original source code exists anymore. If it does, can you even compile it? When you're looking at Oblivion, they still had the code. They could still compile it. Putting the code into the new version of the engine was a possibility." And I kind of agree with Bruce on this aspect as well. We've seen other games have this issue. Final Fantasy VIII Remastered was a perfect example. They lost the source code, and a lot of the stuff they had to basically rebuild on their own and make specific changes. Final Fantasy Tactics, that was also another one too from Square Enix. So many games back in the past, especially in the 90s, for some reason, nobody kept a backup of it. I remember a story about Toy Story 1 or 2, I don't really remember which one exactly, but it turns out that the original movie was lost to time until an employee had the actual backup of the movie originally on a hard drive in their garage or in their attic somewhere and literally saved the entire project. What happened back then where nobody made backups of anything at all? And that's really the concerning part too, because Morrowind could in fact be lost to time, and that's kind of a scary thing. Even though with projects like Daggerfall Unity and so many others, we've seen other ways to play these older games, but to make remasters or remakes of them is almost kind of out of the question. And me personally, I'm a very staunch advocate of no remasters and no remakes. I don't want any old game to basically be touched. I want them to be as they were when they released, warts and all, because clearly, to me, that's when they're the best. That's when those games shine, when you accept the fact that there are some inconsistencies. Sure, the control scheme and the mechanics aren't modernized, but modernization of video games, it's pretty much only been bad across the board, and games that are actually good go back to the older style of video games in the first place. Dark Souls is a great example. It feels a lot like Castlevania when you play it, just in a third-person perspective. You never thought I'd make that analogy now, did you? Think about it. Go play Dark Souls 1, then play Castlevania, and you're gonna see some shit. But I also look back at games like Metal Gear Solid 1. I don't want that game remastered. I hated the Twin Snakes version. I thought it was actually terrible. Hot take, I know. And I feel like older games should be kept the way they are. I don't want them modernized. I don't want better UIs. I don't want newer mechanics. I don't want to modernize things. I want things as they were. I want them difficult. I want them fun. I want them full of depth and mechanics. That's what I'm looking for, even at my old age and my limited game time as well. But there's other parts as well that Bruce talks about that really show the real concern of the gaming industry. Bruce continues by saying this: "People even had cringe moments with the Oblivion remake, but they forgave it because they're reliving something. They're enjoying the nostalgia. I worked on Oblivion. I'm even responsible for some of those cringe moments. The further back you go, the more that's going to be an issue. The reality of playing Morrowind will not stand the test of time, in my opinion." Now, if you were to completely remake Morrowind with the Skyrim engine to try and rebuild it from the ground up, that's a whole other story, but that's an entire project. That's a whole 4-year dev cycle. Why not go make something new? This is where I got pretty angry, actually. Bruce was just saying things to honestly say them, and I feel like Bethesda themselves have a really big issue with their past and their history. I feel like there's an actual really big deviation point in Bethesda specifically, and it almost sits around when Morrowind in fact came out. You can kind of see it with Oblivion as well. They deviated far more away from Morrowind than what that game was doing, especially when Oblivion came out on the 360. You can clearly see that line, and it's almost like they're ashamed of their past. It feels like Blizzard as well. Blizzard being ashamed of what Blizzard North did and the kind of games they created. And you can see that deviation point and that entire thing just completely go the opposite direction. Almost like they're trying to swing the pendulum in a different way altogether, as if the past wasn't good enough for them and they felt they could do better. Yet when they try to do better, it falls apart in front of them. And also talking about remaking Morrowind and Skyrim's engine, that's already being done. Skywind. It's a real thing. It exists. It's almost done. It was almost done 10 years ago, but it's almost done. Hopefully. We'll see. But the problem is, though, I really feel like Bruce may in fact be out of touch and, dare I say, even out of time. Yes, that's a Hall & Oates reference. Because Bruce was also one of the main people that decided to do this to Skyrim. Mickey D on Twitter said this: someone's got to take the mic away from this former Bethesda dev, with an article saying this: we got rid of attributes in Skyrim, and you know who complained? Almost nobody. Former Bethesda lead pushed for a streamlined RPG where you don't have your head buried in menus, stats, and rules. Yeah, we definitely have to take the mic away from Bruce Nesmith and even from a lot of Bethesda devs right now. Because when you ignore stats and rules and everything else and try to streamline an RPG, you get people that say the combat in Morrowind is in fact bad and not good. And that's really what concerns me the most. People who say that Morrowind's combat is terrible, that all you do is swing and miss, clearly either A, don't know how to read a character sheet, or B, never played an RPG in their life. Or the fact that those same exact people feel like you have to min-max Morrowind to even play the game and be good at it, when all you got to do is just pick a skill, say, oh, this is cool, and just keep using that skill. It's almost like the more you do something, the better you get at it, and so it just keeps getting better, and you can basically break the game. The entire game in the beginning literally tells you, hey, you can do wild shit here, and it's a great way of doing it. That's the entire reason why the wizard falls out of the sky. That's the whole reason why you get the entire skill to jump across a continent in the very first level of the game. But people don't see that. They see jank, they see low poly, they see rough graphics and textures, and they ignore it altogether when all they're actually doing is dismissing a game that can truly change exactly what they feel about the industry as a whole. In fact, other people were pointing out that the combat in Morrowind isn't bad. They just don't know how to play a video game. Armjoy on Twitter said this: to disprove the stupid meme of Morrowind combat is just missing everything, he reinstalled Morrowind Game of the Year version, created a character, ran straight to the shop, bought an axe you start with enough money to get, ran out to the first mud crab that he saw. And what actually happened? Well, he properly spec'd into axes. In fact, you can see his skill right here. 45 into axes is a major skill. And then he just one-shots the mud crab. Didn't even miss. Literally the simplest thing you could do. Anyone who plays any ARPG, anyone who plays any actual role-playing game, anyone who's played D&D knows, why would you pick a weapon that you're not good at to then use and then complain that you keep missing? But things get even more wild because you can clearly see there seems to be a lot of issues in Bethesda directly. Because according to PC Gamer, Skyrim lead praises Todd Howard for trying to desperately not to micromanage and be a bottleneck, even though he still does what's called seagulling, where he swoops in and changes things. And what's crazy is even other game developers and streamers had opposite opinions of what Bruce Nesmith and even Bethesda actually thinks about their games. Check it out. Dylan Rogers said this: saw someone critique Morrowind as, quote, you have to talk to NPCs instead of follow quest markers, and I find it a bit sad that some see game worlds as only lists of errands to follow. We should aspire for games to have worlds where its inhabitants are substance over filler. Dan's Gaming said this: I did many times, and yes, Morrowind is still one of the best Elder Scrolls games. It's still their best main story, and the atmosphere of the world still holds up even all these years later. A remake/remaster with voice acting would be a big hit. Hanya on Twitter said this: probably the biggest red flag a game developer can say is this, by the way: Elder Scrolls 6 is doomed. 20 years ago is 2006, by the way. This guy effectively says you would cringe if you played Metal Gear Solid 3 or WoW Vanilla. And Hanya's right, so is Dan's, and so is everybody else that talked about this. If you go back 20 years, you're looking at 2006. You're not looking at 1986 or even 96. I know, the bones in your body are turning to dust right now as I tell you this, but think about that. 2006, those games defined an entire generation. Those games defined actual gameplay and role-playing in video games. Those games brought actual life to what we have now, and then we're seeing modern gaming spit on the actual shoulder of the giant that they're in fact standing on. And the example for WoW Classic is totally apropos. When you look at what they said before, we're literally telling their audience, you think you want to go back to Classic WoW, but you don't, yet they turn around and when it released, it was an actual big hit, and everybody ran back to it until they also buried that into the actual trash, ruining the idea of what Classic WoW should be, because they noticed that it was cannibalizing their retail version of WoW. That's really what we saw. I really feel like what we're seeing right now are game developers saying that they feel they can do better of what was actually considered perfection before. It's like going around to the Louvre and saying, I can paint better than the Mona Lisa. And when they paint it, they show everybody and nobody gives a fuck because it's not good. It's just literally exactly what we all knew it was going to be. Actual garbage. And sure, I sound like an old man yelling at a cloud right now, and that's pretty much been my entire persona. And that's kind of why I've gotten so deep into Warhammer as well, because it's got this great style of lore, this deepness, this richness that you can't find anywhere else. And it grabs you and it pulls you in. But the thing is, you don't have that with games anymore. All you've got is checklists, icons, battle passes, bullshit, always online, all this garbage you don't want to interface with, menus, time-gated mechanics, all this stuff that just takes you out of the experience, that pulls you away from what could be a good game. And then developers freak out and lose their minds when Baldur's Gate 3 releases and they cry and scream they can't make a game like this. Or Elden Ring comes out and people lose their shit going, I never liked Souls games, but this got me. And then they become a massive fan of the entire genre. That's what I'm talking about. We need games like that now, and we're getting them in the indie space. But major developers and publishers don't get this. And even devs right now still don't get this. Saying that they would cringe from a game from 2006? That's bad. That's real bad. In what way would you cringe? Because of the graphics? Graphics today are garbage. It's all ray tracing, 25 FPS, chromatic aberration, motion blur, vignetting, film grain, all the stuff that nobody likes in graphics in the first place. And it looks worse. Is it the combat system? So people can't read a character sheet with numbers? People lose their mind when they do that? Is it the fact you have to go and read actual text from NPCs? Oh no, the horror. Having to read? Hell, even Kai Cenat's reading now. What are we doing? But look, I love Morrowind. That's why I'm making this video. I love older games. That's why I'm making this video. And I feel like the gaming industry itself has completely lost the plot about why people enjoy games in the first place, and why you're seeing indies take that mantle, and why you're seeing people retreat to retro gaming as well. Or even like myself, getting really deep into Warhammer. I mean, really deep into Warhammer. But anyways, I want to hear what you guys got to say about this in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you want to see more small essays like this or more content like this, subscribe and I'll do my best. Some more reaction videos for Warhammer coming up soon, and maybe even some streams of me painting some miniatures, or even then playing some more Warhammer games on stream as well. Maybe even some Morrowind. You never know. With all that being said though, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great one, and I'll see you next time.